Hello, in this video I will show you how Phill and I made a light up bookmark for my niece. The bookmark has a simple castle design on the spur of a hill with a moon overhead. The castle windows light up if you press down on the moon. So first I will show you the tools I used for this project. I have a printout of my bookmark design. I ended up drawing a final version on the computer, but I began with a sketch, and if you planned to do this yourself, you could certainly just create it from a drawing. Next we have a LilyPad e-sewing prototype. This has a battery section, a button, a separate switch and 3 LED lights. We ended up using all 3 LEDs, the button and the battery section. We did not use the separate switch. I have a small piece of luchador. You can get different thicknesses of luchador, but I went for the thicker variety. You can see that I have already traced the design for ease. Next there is a glow-in-the-dark paint for the moon. Not essential, but I thought it would add a nice extra touch. I've got a range of paintbrushes and fabric paints for creating the footpath, grass and sky. A jar which I will fill with water to clean my brushes when required. A set of intense blocks which can be used on textiles, just because these provide a wider variety of colours than the Dylon paints I've got there. There's a small piece of wadding to pad out the inside of the bookmark, a piece of black felt for the back of the bookmark, and a bobbin of conductive thread so that it can stitch a circuit as well as scissors and a needle. Other items I used included the sewing machine, the embroidery foot on the sewing machine, because I did some free machine embroidery for this, and relevant sewing threads for the design. I used a snap fastener as well from my set, a green one in this case, so that it matched the grass section as it was at the base of the bookmark. First I began painting the luchador. I started to mix the Dylon paints to create a shade for the footpath, but ended up using the colour blocks to create it. With these colour blocks you can use water to spread and blend the colour. The great thing about them is that you can mix the different shades in the set and it just adds a bit more texture and depth, like I'm doing here for the grass area. Again, you can use some water to blend the shades together. I used the Dylon paint for the sky. You could of course layer fabrics using applique for achieving the different elements of the scenery if you don't have any luchador or fabric paints, but I just decided to do it this way because I did have the tools. You could wait until the colours have dried before adding the glow-in-the-dark paint, and I probably would recommend doing that, but I was quite eager to carry on, so I started adding the glow-in-the-dark paint to the moon straight away, just so that it could all dry at the same time. Once dry, I headed over to the sewing machine to machine embroider the castle silhouette onto the luchador. Again, this is another case where you could applique the castle design, but I went for machine embroidery to ensure that there was a thick enough layer in place so that the LEDs only shone through the windows in the design. Also, due to the size, it might be quite tricky to applique. However, you probably could use something like black felt and just glue it in place. Luchador is great for machine embroidery as it's such a stable material, so if you did want to go down the free machine embroidery route, I definitely recommend picking up some luchador. I decided that the footpath, moon and top of the hill needed a bit more definition, so I just added a simple bit of stitching to add a bit more definition using appropriate colours. Next, I had to work out where to place the battery section. You can see on my design that I've added a square for the battery location towards the bottom of the bookmark. I wanted to leave the bottom edge open, which would be sealed by a snap fastener, in order to allow the coin battery to be changed. Once I decided on the position, I removed the warding from this section, as well as the section below, so that the battery was accessible. I trimmed the front piece down to its final size and then worked out where the 3 LEDs and the button switch would go. Now here's Phill to explain the circuit used for the bookmark.
Thanks, Chloe. This is a simple parallel circuit. The battery is powering the 3 LEDs. To complete the circuit, the button is pushed. When it's pressed down, the LEDs light up.
To create the circuit, I stitched the conductive thread to the positive section on the battery board, and then did a simple running stitch through the wadding and black felt up to where the first LED would be, situated in the middle. I secured the plus section on the first LED into place by stitching it down a few times and then cutting the thread once knotted. I then went back to secure the battery side with a knot. Next, I stitched the positive side of the next LED. For this one, it needed to connect up to the original line of thread, which connected my original line of stitching that linked back to the battery positive line. You can see here that I secured it and then cut the thread, but I could have continued stitching to secure the third LED on the other side, which would have saved a bit of conductive thread as well as time. To ensure the LEDs had been connected correctly, Phill used a wire to test the circuit to complete the other section. As you can see by the sped up blinking lights, this test proved that the stitching was fine. However, it's a good test to do at this stage to save you time having to unpick your work at a later point if it's not working correctly. To connect the top of the LEDs together, you can see that I've done it the way that I described earlier. I've created a running stitch between the right and left LEDs and then created a new line of running stitch from the center LED, which I secured to the other line of stitching to connect them together. The side of the LEDs are all negative connections on this end. Next, I worked out the location of the push button, which would be placed under the moon. I continued that line of running stitch right up to one of the connectors on the push button and knotted it there to secure. The push button doesn't have positive or negative connections on either side, so you can connect whichever side you want first. I then started a new piece of conductive thread, secured it to the other connection on the other side of the push button, Then I made a running stitch that went all the way from this point right back down to one of the negative connections on the battery section, making sure that I avoided any of my earlier stitching to avoid short-circuiting the circuits, and ensuring that the stitching remained within the constraints of the bookmark size. Once again, I secured it with a knot. I popped the front of the bookmark over the top and tested the light layout and that the push button worked. Next, I used my rotary cutter to trim down the wadding and the felt backing. I pinned the 3 sections together ready for sewing. I took some fairly neutral thread and began to stitch around one side, the top, and then the other side, leaving the base of the bookmark open. I then did a further trim with some scissors to neaten off the bookmark a bit more. I tested it once more to check that I hadn't accidentally cut the circuit threads, and then moved on to securing the base. I used a snap fastener kit, but you could use a regular popper if preferred. The kit came with an awl, which is great for marking the 2 sides of the fastener on both sides so that it matches up nicely. And there you have it, one completed light up castle bookmark.